somehow I guess like in a way that you can actually discover your true self in some special way by wearing a mask. This particular project here started back in 2006. So originally I had an exhibition in LA called For the Love of Toby. And Toby was created as this kind of icon figure that was to blur the lines between fine art and toy culture. Toby represented somebody who loved you unconditionally and was the keeper of your dirty little secrets. And somebody who would always accept you, somebody who was like your mirror, your shadow, and your best friend. So this is Toby, and don't be shy. You can go play with him. You can do anything you want because he's like great, he's bendable, movable, goes everywhere, anywhere. You know, he can handle anything. Flies up, comes back down, all around. While I developed the prototype and the actual Toby itself, I started taking him around because I was being asked to do lectures and exhibitions around the world. But I wanted to document my travels with Toby in a way that I didn't want to, it wasn't like a gnome where he was just going to certain places and to landmarks, although he's been in photos with landmarks. The notion was to try to create these photos that created this kind of surreal vision and this otherworldliness that kind of Toby represents, and then have them in the photos. Here are some of the retired Tobys. These are Tobys that have traveled throughout the world, and after they've done some pretty long traveling and gone to important places, I would retire them. And they'll be in the museum exhibition. So pretty much, let me see. So this was in Spain at the Dalí Museum, and over to Barcelona. He has the actual bones of Chinese babies in him. But other than that, I had the original prototype made by a Estonian artist who went based on my design, and then my dear friend Connor Libby, who I collaborated with many important designer toys. Toby was created in a way to be my alter ego. And now you see me with long hair and you see me with a beard, but for many years, for about a dozen years, I kind of looked more like Toby. I don't know, this is my, I don't know if you could see it, but this is my old Disney ID from when I had my animated show Teacher's Pet. I did this little PDF kind of as a prototype for a possible book. So this is Toby outside the Vatican, and so this was actually one of the first most important photos of Toby. At the end of the day, or actually in the course of the evening of the day I took this photo, the Pope dropped dead. Here's a big pile of sketchbooks, you know, of things that I use when I work on exhibitions. And again, during my travels, I'll carry these books everywhere I go. So you can see when I was working through this body of work, I just go through the sketchbook and go through the drawings and trying to understand what I'm trying to do, come up with. And here again is like, for my travels and when I'm working through ideas, I have, again, other people draw my books sometimes. But here's when I was in Canada, I was traveling. And then before that, I was in Mexico and Chiapas. And so here I was going through and seeing all the native Indians. And I was here during a fashion week. And then here is in Modena. And over here I was in Milan. And actually I had a large painting during the Venice Biennale. This is back in Venice. So while I was going through the Venice Biennale, I was documenting things. Like here I was inside to see this exhibition with Mauricio Catalan. And you're not supposed to take photos, but of course I did the drawing, and then later I took my camera out and took some photos of Toby with the horse. Again, I just came from Eastern Europe, and these two books were the books that I kept my journals and drawings through going to the original hometowns of my parents. So for me, trying to understand it now through my drawings, and this is like one of my favorite, but using these forests, and actually these birch forests, because my father's town is named Brezna, which in Slavic means birch tree. When you're not actually exposing yourself, when you're actually hidden, more of your real self comes out. And I do have a love for, even to the point where not only do I produce costumes and masks, I have a collection of about 1,500 to 2,000 photos of people in masks. But here, as you can tell, is all these heads are actually heads of costumes from an exhibition I had called Giggle and Pop, which was first at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And then we did it again over at the Culver City Art Walk. This is actually a larger shushu head. This is from a very special costume from La Noche de la Fusión. So is that large ha-cha-cha-cha head. So that was actually part of an exhibition where I created my own mythical holiday. And after going to Brazil and participating in Rio Carnival, I was inspired to want to create my own holiday and celebration. So the celebration is about La Noche de la Fusión, is the night of the blending, the night of the blurring, the night of the fusing. So what I wanted was an evening where the night that the walls of society, structure, came down so we can discover, accept, and love our true self. And we did so through dancing, through games, through music. And so that was one special evening at the opening of this exhibition that I had in Culver City. Here you can see a lot of remnants of a lot of things that I do. Here are some of the vinyl toys that I've done with Toy 2R. And this is the Buckingham key. And you can see there's the hump key over behind him. Up on the mantle is a couple of my Emmys, or actually 3 of them, 2 of them for Best Daytime Animated Series. I created a TV show called Teacher's Pet. And of course my most important award is the 5th place East Valley League Mile Award, which when I was in high school. And just recently with Kid Robot, I came out with Toby's Secret Society. So again, with my love of Toby, they came with like little mini versions of Toby. What we also did was I came up with 7 sacred magi's. So these magi's are like the keeper of your memories and your dreams in a way. And so there's 7 of them. So here is trust, and then this is the magi of freedom, the magi of love, the magi of lust, the magi of truth, and he's probably the most important of all of them to me for some reason, except for, of course, the magi of compassion, which is Blackie, that cat, and destiny. So these are these little mini figures. They come in little boxes like this, so you don't know what you're going to be getting until you open them up. And for me, they're almost like a fortune, in the sense that whatever figure you get says something about you, or something about who you are, or what your needs are. So here again is like in Rome, this is in Cleveland, so I love taking photos of Toby in cemeteries. Here's over in Red Square. This is in Chiang Mai, Southeast Asia. This is behind the Play de Tokyo in Paris, and this is over in Miami at Art Basel. Pisa and Paris, Norway and Ipanema. I'm Blackie, the cat. And then this is over in The Hague, Bangkok, here in Rio, Florianopolis, Brazil, and Los Rocas in Venezuela, LA, Jerusalem, Buenos Aires, Tijuana, and Nikko, Japan. So here is also like other figures like my Ha-Cha-Cha-Cha devil. He's a little devil who deflowers angels by stealing their halos. This also I did with Kid Robot, which is the Midnight Magi, which I just loved him as a figure. He's the keeper of your darkest dreams. So he was like one of the earlier Magi's of the 7 sacred Magi's. So I love the little skeletons and the one in the back. And I loved him so much that when they invited me to do a Swatch watch, I wanted to do a Midnight Magi watch. So it's always midnight. Because of these books were created during this trip to Eastern Europe, because normally, like with most sketchbooks, it would just be drawings on each page, like here, you can see. Just nothing but drawings and drawings and drawings. Here became pages and pages of writing from everyone I spoke to, and every evening I would sit down and try to write what I learned about being back in the Ukraine and Poland. And so also when I visited the towns of my parents, for example, this is an original piece of birch tree from my father's town in Brezna. And what I also have here is like, see this leaf? This leaf is actually from the site of where my grandparents on my mother's side were mass murdered. And then over here I have leaves And these leaves actually came from the site from where my grandparents on my father's side was mass murdered. So again, trying to keep these kind of mementos. But even like when I was traveling to Eastern Europe, to these towns, I started imagining what I was going to run into. And so this is actually what I imagined in the forest. And this is the day I was flying in. On the plane, I drew this. So I kind of use, again, old paper and old books. And lots of times I'll draw on them. For example, like this is actually a book on fascism from the 40s, 30s, 40s. And I wanted to take something that has like something that's truly ugly inside and then create some kind of beauty from it. So I would draw on top of the pages. And here too are some other old books that I would actually paint on. And this is from this exhibition that I didn't put these pieces in the show. Is Vicious. And here's a couple. So in my exhibition La Noche de la Fusión, not only did I travel to Brazil to be inspired and to create this kind of carnival holiday, I was also in Thailand and I was inspired by all the Buddhist temples. After going into these places that you just kind of found centering and kind of peace, I took my Shushu character and I created the enlightened shoe. So what I wanted was a type of shrine that would have the enlightened shoe, but also below it was all these other enlightened shoe sculptures created by different artists from around the world. So again, just like I wanted La Noche to represent a holiday that kind of existed all over the world, I wanted the enlightened shoe to exist as a deity. So I asked different artists in Mexico, in India, in Thailand, in Spain, in Russia, Brazilian Indians, in North Carolina, in Texas, from all over to create their own version of the enlightened shoe. I don't know how. Probably look pretty sexy. Plain and simple. What I just took from my mother's home, this is an old Jewish prayer book from like 1890. I remember my dad showing me this. It's kind of very delicate, which is German and Hebrew. What I found with this book was this book. And this book is a book called the My Shtetl Berezna. Also, it's a Yizkor book. So survivors would write books of memory about their towns. And this was printed, I think, in 1950. And in fact, I never even knew my father had a copy of this book. I found out about this book through a distant cousin in Israel. Part of my father's story is actually written in the book of things that my father never told me. And I had no idea he had the book, and so she told me about the book. I didn't know where it existed. I knew there was one copy in the New York Public Library, and it's only published in Hebrew and in Yiddish. Just about a week and a half ago, I was visiting my mom and discovered that this book actually existed in my dad's closet. Because usually, my themes about art are about self-discovery and sexuality and just about life, and so while I'm dealing with this story of my father, it just dealt with this sense of mortality and will and living life. What is living a full life? Watching parents that kind of sacrifice so much for their children, and at the same time lived happy lives. Growing up in our generation, and what does that represent? So for me, trying to discover that through my characters, of what is good and what is bad. Because I grew up, when I was younger, with these thinking that I had to follow the rules, in a lot of ways, to be a complete and successful individual. Because you want to be thoughtful, you want to be good. And then getting to a certain point in life of realizing maybe quite a this is kind of arbitrary, and what is real and what is true to yourself. So I don't really necessarily, when you were mentioning the notion of what is Jewish art, it's like I've been a very secular Jew my whole life. I mean, I was bar mitzvahed, but, I was married to a Catholic woman. I don't pick friends based on race at all, ever since elementary school. So, I may use certain Jewish symbols and Jewish ideals, but for me to look back at the world that I did come from, where my grandfather. He was very religious. In fact, for right or wrong, he stayed in Eastern Europe. In fact, he visited America quite a few times to visit he had a brother who lived in Boston, but he thought America was too secular. So he stayed in Brezna, which unfortunately he met his fate through dealing with the Nazis and the Ukrainians who, killed him and his wife and his town. But if it wasn't for him staying there, my dad probably wouldn't have met my mom, and I wouldn't have been born. And this is Little Miss Boo, also known as Le Petite Mort. And so I had an exhibition called Walking Through Walls in New York at the Jonathan Levine Gallery. I used her again as an icon within the exhibition to represent us being able to walk through societal walls as long as we know our true self to live fulfilling lives. I created a lot of these dolls, of these kind of like little ghost girl dolls that I used in my own photography for the exhibition. Even though most of the pieces of art were paintings, I had a few photos. So this is part of what I used. And you can find throughout my home studio a lot of little ghost girls all over their house, kind of haunting the place. Well, I mean, this is a pretty interesting time in my life in that, I was honored by having this retrospective next year at the Skirball in April. And so that forces me to actually look through my life and my work and my art and look at everything. So the combination of the travels of looking back at my family, also looking at my work as an illustrator, as a professional that I had for many, many years, working for every major publication. So not only do I have like a fascination for vintage photos, I love old, kind of like dime store portraits. So when I go to the flea market, if I can find a very beautiful and interesting portrait and it's affordable, I'll kind of add it to my collection. So I actually have a lot more of these, and we just have some of these things put up right now, which are really nice. But these are a little different. These are actually photos. This is my grandparents on my dad's side from Brezna, and this is my great-grandfather from Brezna also on my father's side. So these were photos that I sent to a dear friend of mine in the Ukraine, these designers who actually helped take me to the towns of my parents. And I gave them the JPEGs, and they blew them up, and then they found frames, which when I went to the towns, my dad and my grandparents, I actually took these frame pieces and nailed them onto trees within the town, because a lot has happened in those towns. And where my great-grandfather was buried, the Soviets basically took all the headstones away from the Jewish cemetery, so they don't exist anymore, and they used the headstones for a foundation for a building, and so it's now a park. And so everyone who lives in these towns don't even know that once these towns were 80% Jewish, and that their park was once a Jewish cemetery. So I wanted to let my family know that they're not forgotten. So I took these framed pictures and nailed them to the wall and took my own kind of art photographs in a way of memory during like a 15-year span from Time Magazine, Rolling Stone, Entertainment Weekly, The New Yorker, giving that up to be a painter, working on my own narratives, my own stories, having my, looking at Teacher's Pet, my animated TV show, and the other projects that I've worked on and collaborated over the years. So kind of trying to create some kind of meaning and understanding about that. But at the same time, my exhibition for me isn't so much about the work. What I'd like to try to create that exhibition is to actually turn it into a giant art installation. That again, when people come in to see the exhibition, they're actually being inspired to want to create in their own right. To want them to, by seeing a world, I want to make them feel comfortable. I want to make them realize that art is magical, but it's not precious. So I don't want them to walk into a room that with white walls and bulletproof glass and go, this is important and you're here and you're not. I want them to come into my home. I want you to come sit on my couch. I want you to relax. I want you to create. I want you to think. I want you to think again, and I want you to find something about yourself within the work or within yourself and start creating things and start telling stories about your life and who you are and about the human condition, and trying to really understand what this existence is all about.